Oh, it looks like we've got a few people flowing in now. It's just bang on the turn of the hour, 3 o'clock Queensland time, 4 o'clock New South Wales and Victoria, and I get lost with all the other time changes. But I'd just like to welcome everyone to our webinar, What's Next? Bushfire Recovery for the Australian Outdoor Sector. The facilitators of the webinar acknowledge the First Nations owners of the land we're meeting from all corners of what is now called Australia. We pay respect to their elders, laws, customs and creation spirits.
Are we going to be like this?
Sorry, we're just getting started. I'll just ask if we could just put yourselves on mute as we get started. For video feed, we might just restrict it to the facilitators to start with. So there's an option there to turn your video feed off. But welcome to those who've joined us. We're just in the midst of the Acknowledgement of Country. So as I was saying, we pay respect to the elders, laws, customs and creation spirits. And we recognise that these lands have been places of communion with the outdoors and of learning and teaching in partnership with the surrounding environment for approximately 30,000 generations by the peoples of the world's oldest living civilisation. My name's Dom Courtney. I'm Executive Officer of CORF, Queensland Outdoor Recreation Federation, and I'm also Treasurer of the Outdoor Council of Australia. I'll be one of the facilitators for today's webinar, but in the spirit of collaboration, we also have co-facilitators from most states of Australia. So we have Amanda Lloyd from Outdoors New South Wales, Andrew Knight from Outdoors Victoria is also joining us, Stu Ferenczi from Rec SA, Andrew Govan from Outdoors SA, and Jamie Bennett from Outdoors WA. So all of these people will contribute and help keep the discussion on track this afternoon. But I just wanted to say up front, this webinar is not intended to just be a lecture from us. We're hoping that all of you are here to contribute your ideas and ask your questions as we go along. So just bear that in mind for us. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. Each of you should be familiar with your emergency evacuation procedures for the place that you're in. Hopefully you know where your toilets are located, and whether you're in a designated no smoking area, because I just can't help you with that, sorry. But I would ask that you mute your microphone until you're ready to speak, which should reduce the feedback and interference. And you might need to turn your video off. I think it's going to increase bandwidth and clarity, but we'll see how that goes as well. The webinar is being recorded, and that recording is going to be made available for later viewing. We also encourage you to use the chat feature of the system to contribute as we go along. Thanks to those of you who have already made use of the chat functions. Just to say up front, if you have a good idea you'd like to share as we go along, feel free to type in idea and a few lines in the message area, which will give the moderators some idea of what it is. If you want to ask a question, start with the word question in the chat feature and then give us a few lines to get the outline of the question. We haven't actually done a nationwide webinar like this in this format. So if we run out of time and there's an appetite for more, we'll definitely look into other ways that we connect with you in the future and maybe look at this sort of thing again. So as we go along, yeah, I'm hoping you've all got my slide. And that's the entire slide, as I said earlier, to those who joined us. It's the key questions for discussion. What does recovery mean for the outdoor sector? What's it look like in the past? And Amanda and Andrew will probably give us, lead that section. Another part of it is, what does the outdoor sector need to recover? And how do we all contribute to that recovery? So that's the broad dot points, I guess, of what we want to talk about there, and as we go along. So as I say, please feel free to use the chat feature to get things happening. Just to start off with, I'll hand over to Amanda just to put a little bit of this in context. Amanda Lloyd's from Outdoors New South Wales, so I'll hand it over to you, Amanda, if you want to get started on that.
And remember to unmute myself.
Good option.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for logging in. The list of people that I've seen grow over the last week is pretty incredible. I don't think I've ever seen a more diverse group of outdoors people come through, definitely in my time with Outdoors New South Wales, but definitely also at conferences and events. The list is incredibly broad, from people who are working for government agencies, for sporting peak bodies, not necessarily traditionally in our membership space. There's advertisers amongst you, there are tiny businesses, and there are some of Australia's largest outdoor education companies. And you're covering activities that are just so broad, from everywhere from, there's a couple of all driving companies in there, there's bushwalking companies, there's anything you can imagine that is outside, you are all logged in. So the audience and the people you're potentially listening to is even much broader than when Dom, Andrew and I first started talking. And just keep in mind that some of the discussion today might not seem relevant to you, but it is one of the reasons we actually wanted you all together, is because when we've been sort of collecting some bushfire data, the stories that are coming through from different sorts of providers are really very different to each other. And listening to each other's perspectives can only help us go forward. So if their chat doesn't seem relevant to you, what I'd really ask you to do is think about everyone in the outdoors as a community and how we can learn from each other. Because I know personally, reading through the New South Wales responses to initial bushfire impacts, there was things come up that I never thought would be concerns. And I encourage you to listen to each other and learn some different perspectives about what has actually gone on. I think in these times when sometimes the fire emergencies have been so close and suffocating, literally, probably a bad choice of words to some of us, that you forget what's going on outside your place. So listen to each other, because I think the way forward here is working together. And throughout the fire emergencies, I know I can speak for New South Wales, there's been countless of you who are logged in now. I've seen names clip up who've been volunteering in the RFS, in emergency situations that you weren't even planning for. The skills of outdoor educators are pretty huge. The teamwork we've shown throughout the last 5 months has been incredible. There's been resilience and teamwork go on that entire time. So if we go forward with that mentality, we're only in a better place. I'm going to hand over to Andrew, I think, on that sort of mind. Yeah, looking after each other. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Amanda, very much. So welcome, everyone. Just a reminder too, back to what Dom Courtney from Quorf, who's leading the facilitation day, said, is that in the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, if you're able to be at your computer rather than on the phone, if you can just type in, if you've got an idea, to type in idea, and then present a few lines in the message area to give us an idea, so that when we moderate the questions, we can, moderate the answers and things like that to those ideas and showcase them, we can. And same with question. If you can provide a couple lines after the word question, and then the moderators can prioritise those particular questions. Just wanting to quickly introduce in a moment Anita Pryor. Anita Pryor is a therapist. She's also one of the very important members of the Australian Association of Bush Adventure Therapy, and she's a wonderful person who can help anyone out on the call if you things become a little too stressful on the call for you. Anita will be with us in a moment. But Anita's phone number is 0407 884 114. So that number again, 0407 884 114. And if you do find anything very stressful on the call, please give Anita a call, or if just immediately afterwards, Anita will be there to take your call to help you through. I'm just going to introduce Anita now, if she can hear us and be able to speak.
Hi everybody, hi Andrew. Shall I show myself even though I'm scruffy from making kelp baskets this afternoon? This is me. Hello everybody. So I'm, as Andrew said, a trained counsellor. I trained in family therapy specifically, but my job's supporting bush adventure therapy in Australia, particularly in the outdoor sector. I'm here just to support in a low-key way. I'll be listening in and tuning in and be here if you need to talk to someone. I won't be necessarily hearing everything on the webinar, but I'll have my phone with me so that I can respond if you're feeling something coming up for you. There is a lot of worn out people and tired people in the outdoor sector and stressed. There's been a lot of stress being carried for many months for some. So I want to acknowledge that and just tune into that possibility that that's here with us today as well. So I won't provide a counselling session as such, but just listen, ears to listen, support, and if you'd like a one-on-one chat, I can help you find some avenues for support around you and close to you wherever you're living. Andrew, do you want me to list off just some general help services or just leave it at that for now?
No, I think that'd be wonderful if you could just give us a little bit more information. That'd be fantastic. And thank you again for volunteering your time today. We all wholeheartedly appreciate it.
I love what you're doing with the webinar. So I'll reel off a few names of services. You may or may not know that Medicare is supporting counselling for people affected by bushfires. So that's a free service that you can go and look into. Other numbers are Lifeline and Suicide Assist, Beyond Blue. There's a men's helpline called Men's Line. There's a kids helpline. If you've got young people struggling and don't necessarily want to have the deeper conversations, you can send them to Kids Helpline, which is a really effective counselling team there. There's state-based mental health providers. And I wanted to acknowledge that stress and feeling worn out and being worn down by bushfires like this can have effects like drug and alcohol use, more alcohol drinking perhaps, or straining on relationships, and some family violence can happen, some mental health issues can rise up. So I'll just provide the family violence number as well, which is 1800 RESPECT. And that's, stress can come out in a range of ways. So let's as Amanda said, I think support each other at this time. And I'll tune in and enjoy listening to the content of this really important webinar too.
Thank you very much, Anita. We appreciate you being there.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Anita. It is obviously critically important that we make use of those services that are available. And a big thank you to ABAT for offering Anita's service, and to Anita, of course, personally. But yeah, as far as being there for each other in the sector, it's a wonderful thing to see. And it's also great to see so many people here. We've currently got 79 participants logged on. Oh, it's just jumped up to 82 as soon as I said that. I knew that had happened. But I'm just conscious that there's also potentially more than one person on some devices. So just going to launch a quick poll. This is really just to get an idea of the footprint of this webinar. You should see pop up on your screen a question: how many people are participating in the webinar on your device? This is really just to give us an idea. So if we could spend just a minute, holy mackerel, you're onto it. We've got 37, I can't even count that quick. So that's awesome. It's mostly ones, but a few 2 and 3 people on one device. So just give that a few seconds to complete that. If you can do that via the poll, that'll add them all up. So we've so far 59 of 60 of 80 have filled it in already. So that's great. And it does show us, that we have, we've got 80 people logged in, but we've probably got another half a dozen, 9, 10 in the rest of there. So it's good to see, just so we know how many people we've got on the webinar, and hopefully contributing to this process as we go along. So yeah, thank you for that. We've got 74% have already completed that poll, which is probably the highest poll ever completed in the outdoors, I reckon. That's from my reckoning on any survey we ever put out before. That's probably the best participation rate ever. So thank you for that, for those who've completed that. I'll finish that one off there. So yeah, thank you for doing that. Yeah, so we've got another 6, 9, so yeah, about 90 people on the thing, probably a few more than that at the moment, so that's great. Just like to go on now and do a little state-by-state wrap-up. Just a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes per state, to talk about the fire impact and the major effects to our industry. So I sort of thought, I know everyone knows that New South Wales and Victoria have been and are being hammered, and that's probably something we need to remember about this. This is not a situation that's over by any means. So I think maybe we'd just like to start off with Jamie over in Outdoors WA. If Jamie Bennett has just joined us, hello mate, I'll just hand over to you if you want to give us a quick summary. Jamie's flagged with me that his internet service is a little bit slow, so if it chunks out too much, we'll go to plan B. But I'll hand over to you, Jamie, to give us a bit of a update on the world in the West.
Yeah, mate. Thanks very much, Dom. It's pretty warm over here at the moment, and I must say, for us, we had quite a bit happening before Christmas in terms of a heat wave and bushfires. But thankfully for us, the impact has been fairly well controlled. So we've lost some of our iconic bushland. Stirling Ranges is closed at the moment as a national park, for people who may know that, in our southwest. And then Yancey National Park is just north of the city, so that's been closed, but is reopened now. And we've had some closures around Collie, which is one of our new areas for trail development. So that's been significant concern. But the fortunate thing I think for the West at the moment is that the areas have tended to be isolated areas that are not highly populated areas. So we've, compared to some of the other states, I'd say that at this point we've missed some of the worst of it, but certainly for us, as I would think, assume for every other state, we're still in the thick of bushfire season and awareness, and we had a significant fire at Les Moiety Falls over the long weekend. So we're just being very vigilant here in the West, mate. Thanks.
Thanks, Jamie. I think the word vigilance will probably get mentioned once or twice today. So yeah, thanks, mate. It's good to hear what's going on. I might throw over to Outdoors South Australia. I think Rod from Outdoors South Australia was going to give us a bit of an update from the South Australian point of view. Have we got you on the line, Rod? Maybe not. We might come back to Rod. Stu, do you want to give us a bit of an update from RecSA's point of view of what's going on? If you want to turn your video on and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Come on, guys.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, mate.
I think you've got my video on mute. I think the host has stopped it. So if you unmute me, I should be able to.
There you are, mate. Right over to you, Stuart, if you can give us a bit of an update from the South Australian point of view. Thanks, mate. We heard you briefly, Stu. Maybe while we're waiting, I'll just probably maybe just do a little one on the Queensland situation. As probably, I guess the biggest part of all of this stuff has been media coverage, which seems to have been constant since September, October last year, and the fires have been going on for then. For Queensland, we certainly had fires early in the fire season, so not even late last year, about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the year. So those fires have pretty much under control now or out, but there certainly has been an impact on the outdoors places that we go. We've still got some areas that are closed for various reasons due to the impact of the fires, and but it's generally been on a place-by-place basis, not necessarily wide-scale closures. And I think the biggest impact seems to be at local level for some of our operators, but also the big impact of so many people seeing so much coverage of the devastation right across the country. So that's probably it. Certainly not trying to minimise the people who have been impacted, but Queensland sort of hasn't copped it, and touch wood, we won't to anywhere near the scale that some of the other states have. Some of our operators have been very much impacted, but certainly not as widespread. I think you're with us now.
Have you got me now, Dom?
Absolutely, I can hear you, and I think everyone else can. So I'll hand over to you, Stu, if you can give us a bit of an update on the South Australian situation as it stands.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously it's been pretty well documented that our biggest fire we've had was on Kangaroo Island. So we have had sporting clubs and recreational organisations been affected. Most of the Kangaroo Island Wilderness Trail, which is a 5-day trek, has been at least more than half of it wiped out. The Army's still over there at the moment helping out with recovery, and it was only just declared contained last week, I believe. So we are facing another heat wave as well. So we're going to get Jamie's weather soon. So we've got 40 degrees coming up. So everyone's a little bit on edge. The Cuddly Creek fire as well that happened before the KI fire affected some trails. So a lot of outdoor recreational activities there. Mountain bike in particular, there was a trail that went through there. So yeah, it's a bit nerve-wracking for everyone in SA because it's sort of only the start of the season, just like New South Wales as well. So yeah, pretty much where we're at the moment, much like Jamie, everyone's still a little bit on edge because we know we're going to get a lot more hot weather. And yeah, it's very sad for all involved. Office of Rec and Sport have set up a task force as well to help out. Minister Wingard, our minister here, is very proactive and community focused. So everyone's trying to do everything we can to help in any way, shape or form. So yeah, we're trying to band together just like we are on this conference call today. So bit of an update. Obviously, we've lost a lot of wildlife as well. That's been pretty well documented. All the kangaroos and koalas, and they still don't know the exact number that's been wiped out, but yeah, it's well and truly into the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. So,
on that cheery note, thanks, Stu. Yeah, it's certainly devastating from a wildlife point of view as well. You know, and everyone who loves the outdoors, I guess, you know, that's a real concern. You know, as well as the general loss of access to all these places. I might hand over to Andrew. I'll save Amanda for last. So, Andrew, if you want to give us a bit of an update from the Victorian point of view of what's been going on. But yeah, thanks very much, Stu, for the South Australian perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Dom. So in Victoria, 30% of Parks Victoria lands either burning or been burnt that they manage, which equates to around 5.5% or so of the landmass of Victoria. And that's in two main areas, East Gippsland and also in the northeast in the Alpine area. And when it comes to the government part of things, we've got Sport and Rec Victoria supporting Outdoors Victoria and a number of other peak bodies and not-for-profits in the re-establishment of the outdoor industry Bushfire Recovery Task Force, which is something that was formed after the Black Saturday 2009 fires. So there'll be quite a lot more coming out to Victorian stakeholders that are on the call from a number of different peak bodies and organisations in this space to continue to gather intel and pass that through to Sport and Rec Victoria, the Department of Education here in Victoria, as well as Parks Victoria and Department of Environment, so that they can make the very best decisions and they can also assist, hopefully going forward, with a number of levels of support for our outdoor industry. So please stay tuned there. I think that will do it for now, Dom. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great to see the actions that are being taken. I'm going to keep you on tenterhooks, Amanda. Just Andrew Govan from Outdoors SA just offered to make a few points to just a little addition to what Stu added from South Australia. So, Andrew Govan, if you're there, if you want to unmute yourself and join in and just give us a little update from your point of view, mate.
Sure thing. Can you hear me?
Yep. Away you go.
So, as Stu pointed out, the two main areas that were affected. The other things that's probably been pushed most in this state is the tourism businesses, because KI is quite a peak tourism destination. There's been a lot of people that are not the sort of iconic sites, which have probably been impacted upon the most, where they've lost everything. And that's one of the things that probably other people are noticing across Australia, is it's certain types of outdoor businesses are getting a little bit more attention than others, so because they fit into the tourism field. And that's one thing that we're working on here, is to make sure those people actually get a voice, and because they're not being noticed at the moment. The other part is because the outdoor sector crosses multiple departments, there's some meetings that we're arranging over February with the administrative advisors to get a collective discussion around how land access and land managers, as well as those going and like education department, how they're communicating to people and trying to coordinate it together so that it's not done in silos, which I think is being looked at across Australia as well. So that's just a bit more.
Lovely, thanks, Andrew. Now, last but not least, I'll hand over to Amanda Lloyd from Outdoors New South Wales to give us, obviously there's been a little bit going on in the world of New South Wales, but Amanda, we're only got another 90 minutes on the whole call, so you can't have all of that. So I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, I'll give myself 3 minutes. As most people know, the fires in New South Wales started back when DOMs were going, like in September, October, November last year. We already had very active fire grounds up the north of New South Wales. And what happened was, over time, they've clearly spread all the way down to Andrew there in Victoria over a period of about 5 months. And that has been one of the biggest impacts to New South Wales and the outdoors industry, is that the time frame has just been so very, very long. Similar sort of stats to Andrew, a week ago, National Parks, or Department of Environment more specifically, put out that 6.4% of the state was burnt and 34.5% of national parks, with more in the realm of about 50%, I think it was, of their protected spaces. We've since had a weekend where fires have flared up again, so those stats are continuing to rise. And it would be part of my brief to also say that the ACT holds a little part of New South Wales, and they're also starting to experience some of the more drastic fires coming up onto their literal back doorstep. New South Wales has also been smothered in smoke haze, depending on where you live in the state, and that has been one of the biggest public perceptions of the fires in New South Wales. And we could talk, you know, a whole different webinar on that topic, but we'll just leave it there for now. When we sent out a call for impact, Outdoors New South Wales strategically tried to do that on a week where fires weren't happening. So it wasn't as much, like they're still happening, obviously, where the fire activity had loosened a little bit, and some of the impacts that were coming through at that point have continued to increase. The biggest one is the financial impact to all the big spectrum I was talking about before is just huge because of the time frames. The freelancers have been losing work. We've had multiple employers tell us that they're sending people off to get benefits. There are a couple of government grants out there as well. Our larger employers are struggling as well. They're in a place where the land that they can use, their traditional activities are hard to do. In New South Wales, on a positive note, we've had very little infrastructure damage to actual outdoor education, outdoor rec, tourism businesses themselves. The main centres of most places are okay. We have lost numerous sheds and gear sheds, things like that. But a lot of providers had got their canoes, kayaks, backpacks, climbing gear, whatever it might be, out. There was warning in a lot of those places, and they moved them out before they could get impacted. So that has definitely eased some of the financial resource burden for some people. But we're not particularly finished in New South Wales. We've had a long season, and it continues to go. But everyone has been rallying together as much as possible. We've been trying to reach out as a peak body for support into national parks. There could be someone online now from National Parks New South Wales, I'm not sure, but they're definitely interested in what is going on and the reopening up of tracks. There's a couple of people I know online that have definitely been in contact with national parks in their local spaces to start the recovery process. So there's some good things going on. It's just very slow. We're doing the best we can as an industry to stick together and support each other. Yeah, with hopefully better days ahead. Yeah.
Thanks, Amanda. We don't have a peak body for Tasmania or the Northern Territory, but yeah, so we won't cross to those areas, but thank you for the update on the ACT as well. There's actually been a few comments in the chat as we've been going along, and some questions there, and we will come to those. There was some pretty scary stats there that Emma added in relation to Victoria, saying about 8% of the parks within Parks Victoria state have been burned, and Parks Victoria have attended 794 fires, and looking at 1.5 million hectares, or just upwards of that. So it's pretty scary stats. And yeah, as a few people have said, it's really, you know, January, February is really the start of this stuff for some people. Also, Outward Bounds National Base has apparently been evacuated since the start of the call. So there's a comment there from Alex. So that's in the ACT, which is a bit scary too. So obviously thinking of everyone who's affected by these fires, and yeah, hopefully that evacuation is for the right reasons and that everyone's okay. Thank you very much for the state-by-state wrap-up. This isn't just about us, as I said, we will come to everyone else's world of practical examples. So I'll just hand over to Amanda just to set the scene for some of that, as far as the steps to recovery and what, you know, recovery means for the outdoor sector.
Yeah, I'll just be really quick because I'd like Andrew to take up a lot of the time with some of the proactive things that have happened in the past. But just as Andrew was alluding to, and I've alluded to at the end of our state wrap-ups, there are things that are happening around the country in terms of recovery already. I know someone mentioned in the state wrap-up about our attachment to tourism, and there's definitely things going on the ground there as well. One of the great things I'm seeing, I live on the south coast and have family all up and down the coast, and one of the great things I'm seeing is the grassroots programs to get people back outside and back into those places. And it seems like the most simple thing to do, but giving people confidence to be back outside is definitely something that is starting with a long way to go. We're seeing national parks opening back up, and we're seeing some really tangible partnerships happening with national parks. And I know this is something we'll talk about hopefully when you guys will get to chat later on. There's been varied success with talking to different government agencies, and we'll continue those conversations. But the point of the webinar from now until we wrap up, and hopefully in the future, is really discussing, you know, what are some things that have worked in recovery, and how do we put them in place in this particular fire season that is so different to so many others. And we've taken a lot of our learnings so far from Black Saturday and leading from Victoria's example, and we thank them for handing over a lot of their resources already. Andrew, I'm going to palm straight over to you, and you can take it from there with a lot more examples, I know. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Amanda, very much. Thanks also with that staff from Parks Vic giving us the latest updates, because just like Amanda pre-qualified her statements, is that this is a fairly dynamic situation. So thanks for being on the call to give us those extra updates. I remember speaking to someone senior at Parks the other day in Victoria, and out of, I think, around 1,200 staff, on any one day they had 500 staff fighting fires. So there's some massive amounts of passion and hard work going into making this whole situation as better as quickly as possible. So I've been speaking to a number of people, and these are just some of the examples, and I think we're going to have a lot through the chat room, as Dom alluded to before, around questions. And please address your question starting with question, and then provide the question. And then if you have a great idea, please place idea at the start, and then give us a couple of lines on that so we can get to that very soon. But these are some of the things that I've garnished from a number of different people involved with Black Saturday, and I apologise in advance if I don't get to all of them. One was around strong encouragement from a lot of the industry that went through those fires in 2009 to strongly encourage any schools or large groups for postponement of their activities to later in the year. If we do have particular groups that are a little nervous right now, and they do decide to not go in the next couple of weeks, for example, then there's plenty of time within the rest of the year for us hopefully be able to absorb their patronage. So that was one thing around the learnings from last time, is maybe we can't get you here next week, but what are you doing in 3 months? And that also gave a lot of providers and businesses a real amount of strength to keep going and to rebuild their business by having those bookings moved rather than totally removed. I acknowledge that that can't happen in every situation. So as I said, I'm just providing some examples. Also, there was some wonderful mentorship that went on in Victoria, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a local in your area. And so please connect in with your peak if you're lucky enough to have a peak in your state. Tasmania, you're very welcome to check in with myself at Outdoors Victoria on info@outdoorsvictoria.org.au. And I'm sure the others would echo my encouragement there, that we can connect you great people with mentors that may have gone through this, and some real micro learnings that may help your business or your organisation. So yeah, please check in with us after the call on emails via our websites. Also, insurance advice. Australian Camps Association has some tremendous resources, and again, if we can feed those queries, if people aren't a member of the Australian Camp Association, but would like to access that advice around insurance and all the different types of insurance that are connected with this type of situation, Pete Griffiths, the CEO of ACA, has authorised that if you can connect with your local peak, he will then connect you with that huge amount of knowledge from the lawyers that they've engaged. So hopefully that can give you some solace. Another learning was to feed in, and this is something not potentially for right now, but for down the track, is around charging for want of a better word, a war chest fee onto your particular fee that you charge. And of course you don't have to advertise that, but it is a way that a number of businesses in Victoria and organisations in Victoria have slowly built up a war chest since 2009, so that when something like this does come along, it might be 1% of your revenue, it does in a small way help you out for some amount of time. Another incredible learning, and again, you may already know a lot of this, but bear with us, is around how exposure to the natural environment is the best thing. And I'm not Anita, I'm not a therapist, but that was some pretty insightful advice from a number of people to get back into the natural environment, because fear or travel into the outdoors while you're indoors can be very real, but stepping outside can be part of the healing process. There's been some pretty awesome social media pushes, and I know that Amanda's probably going to talk about one in the southern part of New South Wales that have then led to some larger regional tourism boards echoing those particular messages, and then leading to all kinds of wonderful things. And I know that, for example, Victoria Tourism Industry Council here in Victoria are doing a lot of work around pushing holidaying in Victoria for the next number of years to help the industry out. And another piece that has emerged, and we may have a number of questions on this in the chat room, but is around how to deal with the air quality issue, which is something that's come up this time. And I think there's a number of different ways that we can provide some solutions to that. And we may talk about that a little later on, but I think that could be something for the future when we connect again in some innovative way. But air quality is one thing that we need to work on quite substantially, I think, because depending on which state you're in, depending on how many measuring sites the EPA or the Bureau of Meteorology has, sometimes they can be 50 plus kilometres from where you are, forecasting for 1 hour in the next 24 hours to be quite poor. And that rolls out as the forecast for the next 24 hours, even though it's a 1 hour snippet of that next 24 hours. So there's some interesting pieces around that we can explore potentially now, but definitely into the future. I think I'll probably leave it there for now, and we'll, I'm sure, address some of these further in the chat room in a few minutes' time.
Thanks, Andrew. Just had to actually find the unmute button again. I should have said earlier too, occasionally I'm going to look away during this. It's not that I'm not paying attention, but I'm also dealing with some of the messages that I'm flicking through. So if you've noticed my eyes wandering away, it's not that I'm checking scores in cricket or tennis or whatever else is going on. I'm actually paying attention. I just wanted to let everyone know that. There's a few people online, and this is really the point where I guess we want to hand over to everyone. There's already been some awesome ideas in the chat feature. So I guess, you know, now probably as good a time as any if we wanted to have a look at what's going on as far as what people are seeing at their local area, and an opportunity for people to get the story rolling about what's going on, what are the ways that are different things happening. But I've seen there's quite a few ideas coming through in here. We might harvest some of those later on, but we'll push on, I guess, as we go through with this discussion. Probably the biggest thing is just unmute yourself if you want to talk. But Amanda, do you want to just throw to a few people across New South Wales and just lead that discussion for a little bit, so that give us a chance to hear some of those stories?
I've just noticed as we've been chatting, Dom, and I've messaged Dom and let him know, there's quite a few people from the Blue Mountains that is a well-known tourist and outdoor space in New South Wales. And I've had a few phone calls down this week and emails from people within the outdoor community and within national parks itself. And I think that's a really nice place to start. Quite positive ways of going forward in terms of opening up park spaces, but also being quite proactive in what is actually going on. Is Dylan Jones, are you around in the background and happy to chat? Can I put you on the spot?
Sure, mate.
I didn't think you'd say no. It's a positive story.
You got me there?
Yeah, you got you.
Beauty. So
Dylan, for your information, Kyle from National Parks and someone from Blue Mountains Council's also there. And I know Caro Ryan's also online. You're all Blue Mountains people. So I'll hand it to you, Dylan, and you can share a bit of I think your story is unique in the fact you've come together and supported the industries throughout, but you've also made some really organised steps really early to move forward.
Yeah, and I might have got lucky too.
We take it at the moment.
So I got a phone call from Dave Chitty from Victoria. So thanks, Dave, for that. I know you're online there too. And Dave told me a story from Victoria from a few years ago where Parks Victoria ended up engaging local operators and guides to help with the recovery post-fires a few years ago. And I took Dave's story and asked the local and regional national park staff if there might be a possibility for us to do something similar here in the Blue Mountains. And what it resulted in was a meeting with national parks for the Blue Mountains area. So not the greater Blue Mountains, which extends from the Hunter to Goulburn and everywhere else, but just the Blue Mountains LGA kind of space. And they very kindly agreed to have a meeting and invited along a handful of the local adventure operators to have an initial discussion. And we're really fortunate that the national parks here are super proactive and aware of the value of the natural assets for the community, tourism, education, health, recreation, arts, all that kind of stuff. And it was a really fantastic meeting with them, probably ran for about an hour and a half. And what we got from them was a brief statement saying, look, we're pretty flat out at the moment. We've got kind of like 2 weeks that we think that we'll be mopping up after these rains, just sort of making sure there's no fires still happening. But what they said after that 2 to 3 weeks, what we hope to be able to have to you is an indication of what we can have opened within 0 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, and 12 months plus. So we were able to then we will be able to, based off that information, be able to say, great, hey clients, we won't be able to go there for a very long time, but here's some places that we can definitely look forward to taking you later in the year and do bookings and things like that. So it was fantastic. We were also offered to go back to them with a priority list to say, what are the areas that you would like to have opened first, what in terms of what's important for your businesses. So please go away and bring that back to us. They also indicated what their priority areas were to open, and because they recognise the value of big events in the region, so we've got one here called Ultra Trail Australia, which is a running event that gets global media, and they said our priority is to make sure that the tracks for that event are open by May. So whilst there might be other locations that might be easier or priorities for different reasons, that was one of their highest priorities because of that messaging that would get out in terms of the region is open, please come back, let's get back in there. And the other two things that I've got here to mention are that the guides, that National Parks indicated that there's a possibility that the guides could be engaged through their employers as subcontractors to national parks to assist with work in terms of signage for opening and closing areas of the park. So parks indicated that they'd rather send out an unskilled labour, as in not a national park staff member who could be doing national parks things, but someone who's totally capable of reading a map and putting a stake in the ground. And secondly, with the idea that they could do track flagging on class 4 and above tracks where they want to minimise the formation of informal tracks and maximise the, using the old highways so that we don't cause erosion and damage to the bush. So that was a really cool outcome, and captured in that was the option that might be able to continue into future park closures, whether that's fires, floods, future track work, etc., where they're thin on the ground for staff. So that was a really cool outcome. And then the last one was that they indicated that there was an opportunity for assessing some of the more low visitation, low priority for national parks, but high priority for the operators. So again, coming back to the priority list and saying, look, what's your priority areas? Look, we can't get there as national parks, but you as operators, we trust you to be able to go through and do an assessment based on some criteria we provide or something. And that opens up areas for people to get back to business, basically. So that's the rough story from what we had.
Thanks, Dylan. You've given us in New South Wales a bit of hope and a bit of an edge into national parks, and just saying what is possible in the system we work in. I know there was a quote come through from someone as you were talking about, getting what the skills of outdoor educators are and how they can help in recovery. And Andrew, do you have any more information on what's gone on down there in those discussions?
Sorry, Amanda, can you just clarify that again?
About skills of outdoor educators opening up spaces. That's
right. So David Chitty from Mount Buffalo in Victoria, he's provided that information to me as well, which is wonderful, that I've passed on to current senior park staff around would that be a possibility of what Dylan just mentioned then. So most certainly if some people are interested in Victoria on that type of work, please connect with me via email at ceo@outdoorsvictoria.org.au around that. The other piece too, just I need to mention too, is that in Victoria we've reconvened that bushfire outdoor industry bushfire recovery task force with the peak bodies in Victoria around tourism, around a number of other peak organisations. So we'll be coming back out to Victorians, stakeholders that are on the call to learn more, and it'll be a two-way conversation over the next number of months, and that task force will probably run for a good 18 months. So there's a lot more to come in that space in two-way conversations, but definitely, Amanda, that's something that I have brought up with Parks Victoria, so we look forward to hearing from them.
I guess just to follow on from that, it probably is an interesting thing to just reflect on the skill set that people across the outdoor sector have and how we can contribute to even, and I think it was Alicia Brandenburg put a comment on there about contributing to site assessment and recovery. Some of these skills are in short supply out there in the community. So I think Dylan's comment about people who can read a map, I think you'll find there aren't as many people in the community who can read a map as you might think. So there are some great skills out there that people in our sector have, and it might be something just as a bit of an idea that we make sure we're making people aware of the skills and the resources that we actually have available, that how we can help, which also then builds relationships with the parks crews even deeper within your local areas. I think, there's quite a few comments there. Another one from Rod Q about bringing the outdoor sector and the broader tourism space in South Australia particularly, and that's happening a lot up here in Queensland too, and I know in other places. And I think this is really an opportunity for more collaboration. I think on that topic, I don't know if there's anyone else from Blue Mountains who wanted to comment on that further. I know we did have a couple other people from the Blue Mountains, but yeah, Dylan, if Dylan's covered everything you wanted to say, happy to move on for others. There's been an offer from Emma from Parks Victoria who said she's happy to provide an update too. Maybe we go there now and maybe a bit of a case study from what's happening. If Emma, if you'd like to join in and give us an update from Parks Victoria's point of view. But yeah, really, you know, this is a large part of this is about having people contribute as we go along. So yeah, I'm happy to hand over to you, Emma, if you'd like to. Caro,
oh, there we go.
Yeah, okay.
Hi.
I'll hand over to you if you want to do a bit of an update.
Yeah, I was actually just going to add to Dylan's stuff about something else, and you know, maybe this is an idea for people, but and Dylan, I think, has been across this too, is that some of the operators have started to think about unusual and different kind of tours and different kind of offerings that they can put out there that's maybe not strictly what they're known for. And one example is you know, doing some night canyoning and that kind of thing, and just trying to spread the word around that, and that's getting guides having more work and in slightly different areas. But linked to that is a adventure. You might have to help me out here, Dylan. I might have to go searching. What's it called? Adventure Aid. So a few of the guides have got together and are trying to actually put together a great little local campaign about sort of collaboration between a bunch of the different guiding companies to offer, some of these slightly different experiences, like night canyoning. That's actually quite clickable from a social perspective, and it's something that makes, for someone like me, it's something that's easy to share and it's easy to sort of get some pretty good engagement on. So maybe just coming up with some slightly different approaches and different ways of doing things. But yeah, that was really all I just wanted to add.
Excellent, thank you very much for that. Yeah, and I think that probably is a little bit of this. As I said, it's a lot about collaboration, but also local action, trying to get things happening. I did notice Ines Larkin was from Mount Barney Lodge, one of the terrific operators up here in wonderful Queensland. Thought, Ines, if you wanted to join in, unmute yourself and maybe turn the video on so we can see you, and maybe give us a little bit of an update of what's been going on with Mount Barney. I was actually at Ines's place on the weekend for a little gathering, which was terrific. So just hoping, just a little call out for Ines if you're still with us, mate.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes, mate. Fire away.
I can't get the video up, but that's okay. You don't need to see me. There you go. Start my video. Beautiful. Oh. Here we go. So yeah, we've Mount Barney was 90% burnt out, and we're still working with parks to try and understand how much we can get in. I've just sent them an email as this has been happening about the next month's activities going on. But at present, and I've had a little look in the national park, it is a very dangerous place to go into. There are very big trees just hanging in other trees waiting to come down. So I totally understand their hesitation in allowing people to go into it. They've opened up one trail, they've opened up another, but the general national park is definitely in a holding pattern at the moment. We've had some success in revitalising the business, because we have been through and we're still going through a period of about 90% decline in turnover. which is pretty tricky to survive. So we started to look for ways we could revigorate people coming out to the region. The first thing we did was chuck out some early Barney bonds. So they were just a way of saying to our customers, look, we know you can't come out, but bring forward a little bit of your spending. Invest now and use those bonds throughout the rest of the year. And that had a little sugar hit, and that was great. Potentially that's all you're going to get, but it's better than nothing. Another way we then went was, we know we can't get into the national park, but what is the next best part of the time of day in a really hot summer when people would enjoy being on our property? So we came up with a summer silhouette sculpture. So we've basically tapped a few of our local artists.
I think we've lost Innes' volume.
Places some pretty cool sculptures that. Oops. Yeah, I hope I'm back. Let me give it a go. Am I there? Sorry. Country internet. Love it. So yeah, we've got 14 different sculptures around the property, and the idea was to get people to come out in that twilight time when the sunsets are pretty spectacular, take a photo, share it on Instagram, show the beauty of the view without actually getting into the national park. And then the last thing we've done, which we've just finished, which is why my voice is a little bit croaky, yesterday or Sunday, we ran a Sunday session on the January long weekend, and we reckon we attracted about 300 people out. A local community group ran a bar. We had food, we had wine, we had beer, we had coffee, we had 2 artists playing acoustic music for about 6 hours. Accordingly, everybody had fun. But the best thing about it was it allowed our council, who had been looking for ways to help, to jump on board. Just opening our doors wasn't enough as a business. You know you want it, but there's not a lot that anyone can fund. But by putting together an event, the council was able to look at it and go, oh, here's a whole heap of costs. We can jump on board and help sponsor this event. So creating something, I'm not going to tell you what your business can do, but that for us was a wicked thing, and it's probably as much turnover in our business in a day as it has been for a month. So we're pretty stoked about that. So yeah, they're the sorts of ideas we've been playing with. February's going to be tricky, and I'm hoping March is when all of our guiding starts to kick on again. Just send an email seeing whether or not I've got any access to parks. That will be the next little smack in the face if it happens. Thank you, Dom.
Thanks, Innes. Yeah, I was one of those 300 people who rocked up. My wife and I went, I don't know if this is going to work, but I've got a little photo here of the sunset. I don't know if you can all see that, but from Innes' property looking up towards Mount Barney, and awesome sunset. But and I contributed a little bit with only 1 or 2 beers, of course, so, and dinner, which was awesome. But yeah, and thanks to Innes and Tracy for hosting us there. Look, I guess anyone else who wants to put a hand up or come on and join with some comments, particularly about local activities that are making a difference for your community. There's plenty of comments there which I want to come to, but I just thought at the minute, if we can really open it up for other people to put their hand up to join the video, I'm more than happy to go that way. Stu's just joined back on the video. Do you want to join in, mate, with some comments on that topic? You might still be on mute, I think, mate.
You got me now?
Yep.
Yep. Just looking at some of the questions on there as well, and there's a question there for Andrew. I'm not sure if you've seen it, about the air quality. So I know Andrew said that there was some learnings from Victoria about the air quality. So it might be good to answer that, because we had that here in South Australia. So not everyone may be aware, but when the KI bushfire started, about midnight, the wind swung to the southwest and the fire started burning back towards the whole island. So the whole island was basically in strife, and then all the air, all the ash came through. We got door knocked. I live in South Australia near Cape Jervis, which is where the ferry goes from. So we got door knocked, had to turn air conditioners and stuff off because they were worried about ash and air quality there. So, Ange, I don't know if you had some stuff there about the learnings to answer that question that came from Laura around the air quality. She was interested to hear some of the methods there.
Yeah, so it hasn't really come out of 2009. It's more something that's emerged very recently, and I've had a couple of conversations with some different larger organisations around it. One small bit of information that might be of assistance was the AIS actually has a piece on air quality. But as I also mentioned before, depending on which state you're in and what kind of resources are available in each state, the authorities like the EPA do have to forecast against the assets that they have out there. I think in Victoria there's 20 different sites that they're forecasting air quality from, and therefore you can be many valleys across and potentially 50 kilometres away, as an example, and it might be a poor example, but I'll use that. And so there's a range of different ideas that are coming up around this, and so there could be some being shared, I think, on the chat now. But I'm very happy to communicate at a later date, because it was only early days with some of these businesses working out whether they're going to do some kind of visibility test themselves in their particular area, rather than referring back to the EPA sites if they are so far away. Another organisation was going to be following what the AIS guidelines were. And, you know, of course we have the education department that would obviously feel compelled to be following the EPA air quality measures, and then using them as best they can to inform their schools. But I think that they're, in our particular industry, it is a little fraught because we're often a long way from where those air tests and forecasts are being done. So I'd probably want to open it up to maybe some others that are on the call. I don't know whether Emma, again from Parks Victoria, could now have a chat, or Dom and Mark, whether you've found someone else that would be keen to share their learnings, but I would have to get back to the group in the future on that.
I can jump in really quickly on New South Wales air quality, and I know, Laura, you wanted water. We don't have anything that's come into our inboxes in New South Wales, but in terms of air, I contacted the education department about a week and a half ago, whose long email but very short response to everyone online today was basically it's at principal's discretion, and there's no limits being set. Look towards the health department if you need to. I even asked for recess and lunch times. I said, we've got hundreds of members asking, you know, for overnight camps, have you got any information? And as of a week and a half ago, they just didn't. I don't know if Dan McNamara is still online from the ACT, who can give some background or is able to. I know the ACT's got a statement coming out tomorrow in direct relation to air quality. Dan, if you're able to share, go for it. If not, anyone in the ACT, I know that is coming. I'm putting you on the spot, Dan.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello? Yep, thanks, Amanda, and thanks for your support and everyone else's support last year during our canyoning and caving review. We've had some success in November between fires in the Blue Mountains, and we've got schools going caving in the next couple of weeks, which is really positive. We've been affected pretty badly by bad air for a couple of months, and we've partnered up with ACT Health to get their advice, and we've come up with some guidelines for schools to manage their return next week. Basically, there's a whole bunch of what we call trigger points, where when the air is measured at a certain level at a nearby station, a school implements some strategies to try and manage everyone's safety, and it escalates down through the levels. Clearly that's fraught with some challenges with the air quality being a rolling 24-hour average. It can be completely different from the measurements to what the air is actually like, but in the short time that we've had to get this ready, it's probably a fairly reasonable approach, and schools are being supported to manage excursions and hopefully change them and move to places where there's better air quality. And that's going to be getting published out to principals tomorrow, along with a checklist of things that they can do to support students and staff during this tough time. We've also had some pretty severe hail, and there's a fire just down to the south. So, you know, we're struggling with the same issues that other jurisdictions have faced with bushfires and locations. We've been through this before with the 2003 fires, when Namadgi got really badly burnt, and a lot of people avoided that area for quite a few years afterwards due to the tree fall and water quality issues in the stream. So I think it's going to be a massive challenge for us and for everyone. And if there's only a couple of places left available for people to go, then there's going to be access issues, and then minimal impact issues with those few small places that we can access. So we're working, I guess, to try and get kids outside to do these activities. I've had a bit of an idea that I'm trying to get some legs here in Canberra, where we're hoping to partner with a whole bunch of organisations and have perhaps an activities week, where we partner up perhaps with someone like, say, Kosciuszko Huts Association, and we change, you know, what we've done in the past to going out and perhaps rebuilding a hut or something, and integrating other curriculum areas like woodwork and science and psychology, and running a sort of a program. I think that would allow students to contribute to the climate change and not feel helpless, and also strengthen relationships with those sorts of organisations and providers for hopefully a more long-term sustainable option. I think we really need to look at what we've been doing, and perhaps changing our programs, particularly in the education sector, in the short term. Sorry, I've waffled on a bit. Did that answer your question, Amanda?
Yeah, thanks. For those that don't know, Dan's working in a consultant position with the ACT Education Department. After the canyoning and caving debacle of banning last year, we've had someone step into a role down there. So Dan, thanks for making the proactive measures and actually having a voice within an education department online. It's pretty valuable to have your insights there. Thanks, Dan.
Just to backtrack just really quickly for Laura, hopefully she got a bit of information there about air and water quality. Mark Squires shared some stuff, Laura, a government initiative they set up about water quality. I'm not sure which state you're in either, but we've got SA Water here and Department of Environment and Water. I've got some contacts there that I can probably get some information. So if you're still online, I'll just chuck my email in the chat and feel free to email me.
And also on the air quality, there's a comment from Shannon Grass saying that they've purchased an air quality reader, Temtop, I think is a brand. Their company has to do their own air quality readings because the closest gauge is 250 kilometres away. So I guess then it's a matter, and I don't know, Shannon, if you want to join in and expand on that, but then it's a matter of also having your own known triggers for your organisation as far as what is acceptable and what activities you do in what conditions. But that's an interesting development, I suppose. It's a little bit like it's becoming the new norm as far as we check the weather. We're also checking the weather forecast. We're checking the air quality as it is currently for considering what activities, and then it's also what you do with that information once you've got it. So, and I guess some of these things, Trudy Bennett's made a comment there too, the ongoing challenges of what are the safe levels for things like air quality, water quality and heat. And, you know, there's a point there, when do you have to actually keep people indoors? It's also a matter of when do you have to not, modify your intended programs. And then Trudy goes on to say what is mandated and what is up to a principal's discretion could have impact on businesses' refunds or postponement policies, which is very true. That's a commercial reality of what we're operating with. I think there is also, you know, a whole lot of work that possibly needs to be done around that space, but we also need to take into account that some of these considerations are actually quite local. What's acceptable air quality in one area may not be acceptable in another, and depends on the activities that you're undertaking. So, but yeah, thanks to Stu for providing his details there for people who want to contact him about further information about particularly water quality stuff. So yeah, that's great. Ryder's just put a question out about working together to align sport with the outdoor sector around safe measures outdoors for the schools, customers and others. So I think that's another good point as far as, you know, I think sport gets a fair bit of focus on this, but realistically, we in the outdoors are actually out there living it, and there's, you know, the large number of participation of people outdoors, and the more we can get the message out that, you know, the outdoors, you know, is available and still there as a viable option for people, I think that's a part of what we need to do as peak bodies, but also at local community level. So a little bit of what the guys in the Blue Mountains and what us at Mount Barney have been doing, but also maybe at that higher level. So Amanda, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what Outdoors New South Wales has been doing in regards to that in relation to your hashtag, and talking about maybe some of that sort of program that we've been talking about offline.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just writing notes as I was trying to do too many things at once, something new. Yeah, we've been looking at the growth of the social media campaigns particularly in the south coast of New South Wales, which rose from ground up, like it was grassroots. There was nothing complicated about them, about spend with them, fill an esky, empty eskies, all sorts of stuff about going into areas and building up momentum from within. They got picked up from the media, mainstream media, within 24 hours of them starting from whoever at home, sorting those out. We floated one last week just to see how it would go. And we just put the outdoors is open as our hashtag for a start, just to see what would happen. It's possibly not the best one, but we were just like, how are we going to start this ball rolling and get the outdoors community to help itself? It seems pretty simple, but it takes no time to do those sort of campaigns. And I think social media has a really, really strong role to play in getting people's confidence to go back outside. I know, Nate, I can see your conversation there about getting people, you know, there's nerves in the community. Some of those hashtags I've seen coming up, particularly about the South Coast, are about decreasing those nerves and just getting them outside. And like the peak bodies can obviously roll those out, but it's up to the community to keep them going and start them up. And I'm by no means of the generation that is good with hashtags, so I'm open to any advice whatsoever. But in terms of public momentum and parents wanting to go back outside with their kids, you know, we're in a really good place to start there because they're on social media. Another member of the Outdoors New South Wales board, Roland Handel, who had Wild magazine and is a bit more in the social media sphere than I definitely am, had a couple of great ideas about starting up campaigns about a hashtag that might be something like spend a night in a tent. Caro, I was going to mention you, so thank you for chipping in there. You've been doing some really great stuff on social media as well. And I think that will decrease the nerves of the parent population, and parents speak wonders for getting those kids in particular outside. That was one of those questions that came up. I sent Dom a rather unprofessional video from a South Coast town, Kangaroo Valley, that had got, they'd got cut off for a little while. They were back open, and it just basically had a whole bunch of providers in a very homemade video saying, we're back open. And it was so effective seeing the staff out the front of their centre saying, we're open, we're safe, and everything behind them looked fine. Like, these are really simple social messages that are easy to do, but it's a matter of coming to them together. Like Dom, Andrew, myself, Stu, I don't know, like, we need some help with social media. So Caro and the bunch out there, if you've got ideas, no offense fellas, if you've got better ideas on how to get that message out, like, definitely, I think that's a way, a very cheap way, a very meaningful way, a very easy way for every single provider who uses social media to get that message out there. And the parents will pick up on that. Yeah, Caro, your holiday at home is great. The outdoors is open is the one we've been using. But yeah, just keep them coming. And I think, yeah, thanks everyone. Empty Eskies, another good one. There's loads of them. And maybe that's a simple action from today. We can get a list that are applicable to the outdoors and go from there. And anyone with media training, please send us an email.
It's Emma here from Parkspeak. I'm not sure if anyone can hear me. I've chimed in a couple of times, but I don't think anyone could hear. So am I online now? That's thumbs up from Andrew. Great. I just wanted to let you know, I guess one of the challenges for Parkspeak in this space is that people don't really know where to go. We have a massive estate. We take up almost 20% of the Victorian state. So we've actually developed a bit of a campaign that outlines which campgrounds are still open. So actually making it really clear for people so they know exactly where to go, rather than us saying, just go back out there. So we launched that last week, and so far the web page that has that updated information has received about 7,000 visits in the last week. We've done 3 Facebook posts and reached about 150,000 people as well. So it's actually, it's tapping into data that we're using throughout the fires about which parks are open and which are closed. So it's dynamic, so it changes daily, basically, but it's opening, new parks are opening up all the time. So that information is really, really key for us, for people to know exactly where they can and can't go.
That's absolutely awesome, Emma, and I'll make sure that's broadcast in our next newsletter, which goes out in about 10 days' time.
Yeah, sure.
We'll see what we can do earlier than that as well. So thanks, Emma.
Yep. And I've just pasted the link in there as well. So it might be worth, now that I've actually got some traction, I might just give you a quick update on the other things that Parksvic is doing in a couple of realms. So I guess one of the challenges for us when we talk about, can we get back into parks and how can we help? It's a really, we're really feeling supported by people wanting to do that. One of the challenges is really that we're continuing to fight fires. So, we've got probably half of our workforce every day is still out there fighting fires. So even though the number of fires has obviously reduced over the last couple of weeks, the recovery stuff for us, we're still very much in firefighting mode. And the people who are even back in the office, we're starting to think about recovery, but we're also, we've got business as usual to do as well. So I think the recovery stuff will come in the next couple of weeks. And I think if people can just, just stay connected with us and be patient, we will absolutely start to engage the industry in how we recover. On that note, we've already, with all our 22,000 volunteers, we've already reached out to them where they can register their interest in how they can volunteer in bushfire recovery. So while we don't have the answers for them as to where they can go at the moment, they can register, and then when we do have that information, we can send it out to them. So I think that's really important. And in terms of tour operators, so we're liaising with them on a really regular basis as well. So we've actually put in calls to the tour operators who have been most affected. So some of them have lost 100% of their businesses by losing parks, and some of them have even lost their facilities. So we've actually called them all, and we're also working through, I guess, a plan for how we can support them. So some of the initiatives, I think, that people have mentioned around getting them involved in rebuilding and recovery is absolutely where we're looking at. Probably not for a little while yet, but what we're also looking to do is things like, and we're still bedding this down with DELT, but, you know, waiving the fees that they pay for visitors and that sort of stuff. So we're really committed to supporting our tour operators as they get back on their feet. So that's really important for us as well. Yeah, so look, I guess that's the main stuff. We're really, you know, trying to keep the lines of communication open with our visitors, with our tour operators. We are doing, you know, regular comms as much as we can with everybody, but really open to ideas, particularly from people who have been around since Black Saturday. And you know, we have a few staff here who work through that process, so we're working with them around what worked well and what didn't.
Thanks, Emma. And the other piece is on the air quality chat that we've been having. What's your personal take on that?
So we cancelled quite a few of our junior ranger programs over summer because of air quality. But I guess there's a couple of things for us. So we are not telling people where to go and where not to go based on air quality. We're asking people to check all of the relevant, you know, road closures, all of the relevant park closures, and to check on their own air quality. Because again, for us, it's, you know, we've got a massive estate, and where there might be really good air quality in one area, there might not be in another area. So we're telling them to consult with the you know, relevant EPA website. But where it's a program that we are running, so like Junior Rangers, then we've made a decision based on, you know, whether or not we think it's safe to conduct that program. But in terms of people just going back out into parks, I think the onus really needs to be on them to find that information, and we will push them to that because, you know, it's changing on a daily basis.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Appreciate the update.
No worries.
There's quite a few conversations going on in the chat box, and I thought maybe we might pick up on a couple of those now, if that's all right, as we're going along. Anne-Marie wrote a large comment there about making nest boxes and a PDF to give away free to schools and other people who have the skills to make nest boxes, like men's sheds and tradies, particularly. And looking at options to link in with getting them into natural areas as far as, you know, and not, I like the comment there about not going public with it yet, as we need to ensure we're not creating an additional problem. So that's an interesting aspect of this, of making sure that these are being put in the right place and in the right way. But there is some opportunities there. A few other people have added comments in there. So I'm hoping that those links are helpful there. There's also another stream there about botanic gardens across the country providing support for re-veg efforts, which is an interesting point. I mean, there's a whole piece on revegetation as far as what's going to come out of the fires, even, you know, the soil conditions and everything else before it's a matter of large-scale tree planting process. But yeah, I think there's a lot of work to be done in that space, and I'm sure there'll be all sorts of different nurseries coming to the fore. That. One of the big picture questions that was raised there, Jane Toner has raised it there, saying, can the Australian outdoor sector declare a climate emergency and a biodiversity emergency? And to be honest, you know, I think it's something that the outdoor sector needs to take some leadership on and actually say to people, you know, our sector, I don't think there'd be too many out there who'd argue that it isn't an emergency. It's probably up to each state peak body and also the Outdoor Council of Australia to make a decision on declaring that, and that's probably something that needs to be done within the organisations. I'll certainly put it out there that the CORF Management Committee, our board, has certainly identified climate change and climate adaptation as one of the critical strategic priorities for the Queensland outdoor sector, and that's something we're looking to help outdoor operators across Queensland with adapting to the reality of climate change, as harsh as those realities seem to be. So I think it's a matter of, yeah, good option, Jane, as far as saying, let's put it out there and declare it. But it's probably up to each of those organisations to go through the process that needs to be done. But yeah, I think it's obviously at that point where we need to make a decision on it. So thank you for raising that as a point for everyone to think about. And I guess that's also goes further as far as all the different organisations who are in this. You know, a part of that declaration, it mightn't seem like much to come from a not-for-profit, but the more organisations and people who do make those sort of declarations, the more pressure there is on decision makers, and the more understanding that it's the reality that, you know, we're dealing with right now. As much as people might argue with it, it's something that is a reality for us. So just wanted to deal with that one. And I'm certainly not trying to be dismissive. If anyone wants to add more comments to these, please chime in. Robert Cooling also put an interesting point there about saying that it's postponing programs, I guess, or activities is great, but we should encourage and promote sensible decision making within schools and for our clients. He said we have had postponed programs that are not in or near fire affected areas. And I think that one really speaks to the nervousness that was touched on earlier, the coverage of these bushfires. You know, I guess it is at that level of being, you know, so front of mind for people. Every time they've turned on the TV or the radio and even the social media feeds over the, you know, and Amanda touched on it earlier, the months and months that this has been going on for many places, you know, that's rightly got people concerned about it. And realistically, it might seem like it's a knee-jerk reaction to us, but if these school principals have got, you know, dozens of their parents ringing up and saying, you're not really going to send these kids on camp into those areas, you can see how they might make those reactions. It might be that there's a role for us to play as far as advocating to the Departments of Education to say, we need to make sure these decisions are made for the right reasons, but we also need to accept that they're certainly not doing it purely from a conservative point of view. They're doing it to manage the risks that they think are real. So maybe it's a matter of what the risk perception out there, which we need to talk about a little bit more. Jamie referred to the benefits and some of the catalogues, which is on the Outdoor Council of Australia website, and the benefits of this stuff. So there's a lot of research out there in the benefits of outdoor exposure. So I think we need to push that out there a lot more. There's also a good comment there, and this is quite practical, from Liz Horn, although she's misspelled her surname, which is unfortunate, Liz. It just says, make sure as you replan activities for clients that you pass additional costs on if your contract allows for it. So things like additional bus transfers if you have to move a program to a different site. So I think that's a reality for some of us. If you can pass those costs on, that's awesome. But there's going to be the reality is also going to be some of our operators are going to be bearing those costs just to make sure their programs continue. And maybe that's something that some of the schools out there, maybe they need to be made aware of that you know, that these things are hurting financially. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that space. There's a couple of other comments here. A suggestion that maybe peak bodies and land managers could host a Back to the Bush Expo in capital cities with opportunities for rural tour operators, clubs, communities, etc., to showcase reasons why people should get back to and support outdoor activities. I'm sort of in two minds about that. We're talking about running an expo in the city to get people outdoors, but maybe it's just that intro and that explanation to people. I think also some of the campaigns, like Amanda was talking about, I actually like hashtag outdoors is open, but that probably means it is uncool. So maybe you do need to keep your thinking cap on, Amanda. I thought it was actually pretty clever that you're saying the place is open and it's open space. So yeah, probably missed the mark on that one. But yeah, I think the more we can do that and get people out there, and a little bit of that is using social media for good, and also giving them the traditional media some good news stories. I think they're looking for those stories that they want to tell about these situations for their communities. I'm pretty sure the media, as much as they seem to get ratings from a disaster, there's also, they know they've got a responsibility as far as people's health and well-being, and maybe they want to share some of these good news stories, and if we can give them to them and make them easy for them, package them up, make it easy for them to present them to the community, it might just see some of our areas getting a lot more coverage. So maybe we need to think about that. There's been a bit of talk in the chat box there too about what are the opportunities out of this. You know, there's opportunities for some of the volunteer organisations to provide services and build better relationships with the land managers and the water managers out there. But there's also opportunities, you know, right across the whole sphere to work together. So, you know, even this webinar we're doing today, you know, opportunity to come together that we probably haven't done in the past. It's a bit scary that it's taken an issue like the one we're dealing with across the country, but it's something that we probably need to look at as peak organisations too, to see how we do this a bit more often and get more discussions like this going. Just, I see there's another area there, another idea, talking about, that's again about declaring the climate emergency and going net zero carbon for operations. So, and it says, for outdoor organisations, you need to look at how you can further reduce impacts of your operation and or how your operation contributes to support biodiversity or reduce the impact of climate change. It's another interesting point on how you even calculate your carbon footprint. I actually saw an article today about that, and there seems to be a few different ways and different methodologies, but it's probably the first point is at least having a look at the idea of your carbon footprint for your organisation and what you can do. But I guess the question then is, going back to the 3 dot points on the slide that we have there, is what do we need to recover, and then how do we contribute to the recovery? I guess the carbon neutral process, that's long-term recovery, as far as let's all not be making the situation worse long-term, but what's the short-term things that we think that are needed? I'm not dismissing long-term, but I think we need to keep this as far as what we can do at this point and what we as peak bodies can do, but also different operators in local areas. So happy to hand over if anyone's got a question or a point they'd like to make that I haven't covered enough. Over to you, Amanda.
Just a simple one. There's been a few questions go through about advocating as peak bodies, and yeah, we can get social media campaigns and get people outside. But how do we get the formal policymakers and the suits interested? We've got some concerns with that in New South Wales, as a lot of people would be aware. Andrew, your Bushfire Recovery Task Force obviously came out of a huge disaster 10 years ago. Have you got any suggestions for the other states on how to get something that might work for us and get advocating into government departments listening?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. So, and this is obviously from past history, and we're about to meet the task force for the first time next Thursday. It's really around identifying who has some capability and some intel gathering skills as an organisation, and potentially also looking at one of your key supporters, either within the outdoor provider sector in the industry or within government to support whoever's going to convene and coordinate that particular group. So in Victoria, it's Outdoors Victoria, and there'll be a whole lot more about the other organisations when we meet next week, because we obviously need to be fair and agree on comms with those good people. But I mean, when it comes to your tourism space, as you said, there's some hugely complementary things that can be done with that particular organisation in your state. There's potentially some links in with the park service in each state that often has a not-for-profit somehow connected to it. And also you've got, like in Victoria, we've got a national Camps Peak that's going to be on board. So it's really about having a coordination by one of those bodies and then being able to reach out into the sector to be able to grab the data. And I know that, for example, in New South Wales, you've done a great job, Amanda, in getting that those questions out to really start assisting in how Outdoors New South Wales can work with other organisations. So I think that's a really good start. And then it's about, and I mean, you know, I'm fortunate to be able to have Emma Watts on the call from Parks Victoria, who I've been liaising with. But it's then being able to share that information and also that teamwork with someone like Parks Victoria in Victoria, and the same, having connections into the Department of Education in your state. The timing there for the Department of Education in each state is hugely challenging, because they're obviously about to roll out, or have rolled out today, the start of the new year. So there are some challenges there, but I think that there'll be some more availability because the school year is now teed off. That hopefully there's some more contacts for each state in being able to connect in that regard, because there needs to be some real teamwork from land managers, from the industry peaks, and from the education departments, because we're all positively or negatively affected if we don't use a little more teamwork, and that's probably the biggest learning from Victoria.
Thanks, Andrew. That's really good points there. Just another one. I'm just conscious of time. We've got about 19 minutes left in the scheduled time. Dylan's just put a comment on there about, we've talked a lot about how we get access to lands, and we've talked a lot about retaining clients. We haven't really talked about the risks of loss or retention and attraction of guides and leaders, especially young and vulnerable and casual employees. And I think that's a really good point, that it's an important part of this, you know, and I've certainly spoken quite a lot to some of my colleagues about this one, and it's probably something that needs to be talked about a lot more, as far as, you know, particularly in these areas where the fires have been going on for a long time. There's long-lasting impacts, and particularly where we do have casualisation of our workforce, there can, you know, really be limited work in our sector for quite a long period of time for some people, and, you know, that's going to have long-term impacts on us. So I guess the question there is, if anyone's got any good ideas and want to talk about that, of how the ways of retaining and attracting guides and leaders, instructors, whatever terminology you want to use this week, I think it's worth having a chat about, as far as what are the strategies that are actually working in that space. Happy to open that up to the floor if anyone wants to talk about that. Amanda, if you want to tee off on that, that'd be terrific.
A 1 second comment, really. When we put out our Bushfire Impact call for information, we actively encouraged casuals and freelancers and non-members who sit in various places to write in. We've had a couple of freelancers write in who work for multiple employers. And one of the more powerful things that has come through on some of those emails that have come through to me personally is the drastic impact to the freelance and casual workforce. What has been really promising is that some employers who would be the traditional responders to those surveys have actively encouraged their casual workforces just to send in a very quick email about how many days they've lost of work, over how many months, because we're really great at gathering data from a systems perspective, but gathering data from those individuals who only have missed 10, 15, 20, 30 days of work. To us, that might not sound like a lot, but to some people, that's a 10th of their year's wage. And so any employers on the call I definitely encourage you to get your staff to send in that information from the grassroots up. It doesn't mean that we can help them in the recovery section at the moment, but we need to get a grasp of what's actually going on. And I know, Dylan, you'd posted that, and I've seen months ago, you know, different centres were offering staff meals and things like that. So they're a huge component of our industry, and without those casuals and freelancers, we don't function as an industry. So definitely encourage them to get their voice heard, or as an employer, send that information through to us so we can actually report when we get into government to say what the impact to those people has been as well. Sorry, Dylan, it doesn't answer your question on recovery, but it's definitely a way of just not going in with whimsical facts to government about what's happening to our casual workforce. Yeah, and you're right, Dylan, that we don't know the impact yet, and I'm so scared that some of them will leave after having read some of the stuff. But we can only gather that information and support at the moment. So sorry, I don't have a better answer for you, Dylan. I read every one of those emails and wish I did.
One thing I might add, Dom and Amanda, if that's okay, is I think such a good point. And I think what David Chitty's brought up, which is what is that wonderful piece that's now happening with Dylan up in the Blue Mountains, LJ sort of area, is that if we did have some more data from those smaller providers or freelancers back to the peaks, just on an email saying that I would be potentially available to work for the land managers, that could be some great information for us to then have for our park services to potentially wind up something a lot larger in New South Wales. And there's precedent with it happening in Victoria after Black Saturday. So to me, that could be a point where there may be, I don't know, 3 or 6 months work for some small providers and freelancers in that area to work with their park service.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Andrew. There's also been some points there made about, Liz Horn made a point about talking employer to employer, say, like a job board helping where people are looking for additional workers and other people might have additional staff. So maybe there's some opportunities there. Some of this is just networking and, being able to, rather than losing a good employee, saying to them, look, do you want to go and give these other guys a hand for a little while? And, that way it might work rather than just people being out in the cold. So I think we need to think a little bit innovatively about that. Part of this too is about not losing people to our industry. And, we know we've got some highly trained workforce. They're skilled and they're particularly good at what they do. We don't particularly want them ending up in other sectors. So maybe we need to have a look at that as well from that point of view, as far as not just trying to hang on to the people who we've got, but trying to expand that, the knowledge that we have and trying to keep people, actively employed and, really in there. Just on a few other points, Ian's made a point about the reality is we need access to the outdoors and how do we go about opening areas that haven't been affected. And again, that's discussions, talking to people about, probably the land managers particularly, about what is and what isn't available. We talked a little bit about that, but I take your point, Ian, that there are other areas that might be open, that could be, opened up further as a long-term recovery step. The big thing's going to then be, where's the money in the future to maintain those things? And this is something that in the outdoors where, we need to get better at, as far as it's not just about new infrastructure and that sort of thing. It's also about the ongoing maintenance of it that we need to understand. How does that all fit together and what is it going to look like? And, you're right as far as access to all these spaces, but the other part of that is the benefits that are there available and telling that story about the health benefits and the well-being benefits for everyone from getting back outdoors. That's something we can contribute to.
Dom, just in Victoria, Emergency Management Victoria, they're actually the organisation that authorises the immediate emergency has been completed, and then they will then hand back the responsibility of the management back to either DELP or to Parks Victoria. That's one thing that I just found out the other day that I'd not known. I actually thought it was up to Parks Victoria, for example, to walk in and assess whether they're going to reopen a closed park. And so that's a little bit of information from a Victorian perspective.
And I think that's probably going to be different in different jurisdictions on who has the right to make those calls. And a little bit of that is going to be case by case and understanding how it's going to work. Dave Chitty's made a comment there about the Victorian situation after the 2009-2012 fires in Victoria. You know, talking about what worked and the emergency response task force that did some great work, and then it plays down to now it's about a little bit of reinventing the wheel now. So there's an interesting, you know, suggestion there about having these task forces in caretaker mode so they can meet once a year to keep the membership current and keep the information current, you know, and that's a real option. Hopefully it'd be nice to say that so they could be just in caretaker mode and not having to be responding to issues like we're going through at the moment. That's probably the long-term thinking. The other one there that's just come through, which Liz has put up there about asking if the peaks could do a survey, including, you know, percentages of the venue affected that your organisation uses, days work lost to your employees, percentage of business that you've postponed, and expected monetary impact. You know, there's some interesting ideas there about what, you know, what might come out of this and really, you know, how we can do it. I think that's an important part of this. And it's, again, part of that is then getting people to actually respond to those surveys. I was, you know, a little bit flippant earlier saying we had 75% complete a survey just before about how many people are on this thing. But realistically, and I don't think it's just Corf, but every time any of us does a survey, we seem to get the same people fill the survey in, and they're the core group. But we really need, across the industry, people giving us the data so we can, you know, advocate well to government. I'm not just trying to do an ad for what peak organisations do and how you guys can help us. We're here to represent you, so we do need your assistance to be able to do that to the best of our ability. And we will do it to the best of our ability. We just need a bit of help of, you know, the information that you guys have. And I think sometimes we forget some of the resources that people in our industry have. It's just a matter of getting you to give it to us sometimes. So if we do put out a survey like those ones that are suggested, I think there's, you know, it's a little bit of, we can only nag you so much. Everyone gets sick of reminders about surveys, but if you could just fill the thing in, then you don't have to worry about us nagging you if everyone does it. So there's my shameless plug for you helping us to do some of this work, so we help everyone. So I noticed Amanda and Andrew nodding along, and I'm hoping you've all, their end of the sermon from Dom on filling out surveys. Andrew, did you want to say something else there, mate? I noticed you've unmuted yourself.
Yeah, so Dom, one thing that might come out of the task force meeting next week would potentially be the group in Vic putting out a universal survey that furthers on some of the questions we initially asked to our stakeholders at Outdoors Victoria last week. And it was in a similar type format to what Amanda had done in Outdoors New South Wales. So I'm very happy to share, if that does happen, I'll definitely share it with the other state peaks and Outdoor Council of Australia, which is obviously the peak across all of us. So that's a consideration. I'll feed definitely back to the peaks that are on the call.
In terms of the survey that we put out that was actually generated from David Strickland's work from 2009, like we went on with, you know, with that survey thinking that's what government wanted. And it was great to see that put out in a slightly different format, but almost the same with Victoria. And I think what was interesting about not putting it out on a survey is we actually got real qualitative stories come through. And I think the percentages, there's time to come, but even if you fill in the one that Andrew and I have done already, I know Outdoors WA, Jamie put out a much more percentage kind of based Survey Monkey thing, which I think is definitely potential in the future. But just like Dom said, fill the thing in. Yeah.
Fill the thing in. I told you the sermon was over. There is a really good point that that Trudy Bennett's made there, talking about if in future we could end up with less or access to less wild spaces as more areas are affected by bushfire and climate change, and whether perception will shift more towards protecting wild spaces through no human access, save for other than wildlife conservation. And then there's a concern that, you know, we need people connected to nature to help them love it, and we need to keep sharing the environmental stewardship that comes from loving nature. And that's a big part of what everyone across the outdoor sector, whether it's the bush adventure therapy side of things, the adventure tourism, the outdoor ed, the outdoor recreation part of this space. You know, I think, you know, at the end of the day, the reason we're all on this call right now and giving up our valuable time, and I appreciate everyone who has given up their time to be part of this discussion. It is about, you know, that connection to these wild places and the outdoor spaces that are important to us and play a big role in our lives, but also in keeping us healthy, keeping us out there and connecting us to our friends, our people we don't even know yet, but also connecting us to those places and having some of those experiences. And I guess if we're really getting to that high level stuff of, okay, we'll just lock it all up because it needs to have no one in there because, you know, a human being could light a campfire and that could get away. I think we need to, you know, have that discussion and say, no, we want people who are going to actually lobby for all of these places. And, you know, the public lands, at the end of the day, we're all part of the public. So it's about access to those spaces for everyone right across the country, and how we can be part of helping protect those places and advocating for more of those places, because that's the other part of this discussion, that we're talking about access to the existing natural places, but we also need to think about, you know, what are the other places that need further protection, and how do we expand some of those places to actually make sure we've got the ongoing places and spaces where we can have outdoor activities. Another one that's sort of hasn't come up a lot, but even access to private land adjoining national parks or protected areas state. We need to look at that as well as an industry, as far as spreading the love a little bit of some of our activities. And I really, you know, I guess as a positive note to finish on, I think we need to just have a think of, you know, the wonderful experiences that we have had. There's been some traumatic experiences over the last few months, and some of this could have brought up, you know, some memories from many years ago for some people. And I think the fact that we have had Anita on the call too, if anyone does need to contact Anita, happy to reshare her details, and they're in the comments there in the chat box. But you know, I think we need to think about that, and also think about the support that you might be able to provide for other operators right across the sector, for anyone who's in your sphere of influence, I suppose, and how you might be able to just, you know, when you ask that, how are you going, don't just accept the, yeah, I'm okay, how are you? Let's actually have a think about delving a little bit deeper and say, no, how are you really going? And, you know, just check in on each other. I think it's something that as a community we do well, but as an Australian society, I don't think we do that well. So maybe it's just another point just to have a think about, but also think about how we are all about the good stuff that's out there, and the good opportunities that have been there in the past and will be there in the future. So I guess on that point, I'd really like to thank everyone for contributing to this. Really pleased to have had so many people join us, and yeah, just really happy to have so many people from around the country joining in and contributing to this process. Obviously, there'll be opportunities directly with state peak bodies, but also we'll be looking to do further ones like this, and also the Outdoor Council of Australia looking at initiatives on how we might be able to contribute further to, getting more people outdoors and active, and making sure that the outdoors is the greatest place it can be. So thank you very much for everyone today and for your contributions. As I said, this has been recorded and we'll make it available to share with everyone. Those poor people who missed it first time around and didn't get a chance to contribute, but all of us will be captured for posterity. I think that's the word. And I'll sign off on that note. And thanks to everyone who's contributed, particularly Amanda and Andrew, Stu and Jamie, Andrew Govan. I shouldn't have started a list because you'll forget someone, but everyone who has contributed, thanks very much. And also Mark, of course, who's been over here co-hosting with me. I almost forgot my right-hand man person. But yeah, thanks very much, everyone. And on that note, it's 5 o'clock. So thanks very much for all your contributions. See you soon in the outdoors.